I can still hear the sound. That metallic, muffed thud, followed by silence. The weight of the sledgehammer in my hands, as if it had taken root there. The smell of rust in the air, the stains on the garage floor that no one will ever be able to completely clean. I'm only 17 years old, but I've already known hell and somehow became the devil. But before you judge me for what I did that night, I want you to understand what led me there. Because when you live years in the darkness, sometimes the only light you see is the one you need to ignite yourself. My name is Lucas. I'm 17 years old. I'm leaving the juvenile detention center after serving 1 year. Tomorrow I return home, to my mother's arms. A home that, for the first time in a long time, has no monsters hiding in the corners. I think you've probably seen the headlines. Teen attacks father with sledgehammer while he slept. Those headlines always tell only half the story, you know? They don't talk about the sleepless nights, about the bruises hidden under long-sleeve shirts even in summer, about the terror of hearing a door opening. They don't talk about the years living under the same roof as a predator, about having to choose between your life and someone else's. People love to judge what they don't understand. It's easy to look from afar and say what you would have done differently. But what about when there is no different? When your paths come down to suffering or making someone suffer, I don't expect you to understand what I did. I just ask that you listen to my story until the end, before deciding if I'm a victim or a monster, or perhaps, as I ended up discovering, a little of both. Listen, if you're really paying attention to me and can feel at least some of the weight I carry, I need you to like this video right now, subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications to receive all updates, and comment where you're watching from. It's important for me to know that someone is really listening. Someone who might be going through the same thing I went through and needs to know they're not alone. Or someone who can recognize the signs before it's too late. Believe me, what I'm about to tell you will completely change what you think about me and about what happened in that garage. Because there's a secret that no one but my mother and I know. Something I discovered that same night. Something that changed everything. My life wasn't always a nightmare. I have memories of a normal childhood, you know? I remember my dad teaching me to ride a bike when I was about 5 years old, him taking me fishing at the lake near our house on weekends, my mom making chocolate cakes on my birthdays. We were an ordinary middle-class family in a small but comfortable house. My dad worked as a mechanic in the shop he opened himself, and my mom was a teacher at an elementary school. Things started to change when I was about 8 years old. My dad's shop began facing financial difficulties. He became increasingly stressed, more irritable. At first it was just yelling. He would yell at my mom for anything. The food was cold, the house wasn't arranged the way he wanted it, the bills that kept coming. I remember the first time I saw my dad hit my mom. I was coming home from school, entered the house and heard screaming coming from the kitchen. When I got there, I saw my mom fallen on the floor, hand on her face, crying. My dad was standing, looking at her with a look I had never seen before. It was as if he were someone else. When he saw me, his face changed completely. He smiled, hugged me, and said that Mommy had slipped and fallen. That night, he took me out for ice cream. I was only 8 years old, but I already knew something was wrong. I just didn't understand what or why. Things gradually got worse. The screaming became more frequent. Then came the pushing. Then the slaps. My mom always disguised the bruises with makeup or clothes that covered everything. She would smile at me and say everything was fine, that Daddy was just going through a difficult phase. When I was 10 years old, my dad lost the shop. We had to move to a smaller house in a more remote neighborhood. That's when he started drinking heavily, and that's when things started getting worse for me too. The first time he hit me was because I spilled a glass of juice on the couch. He had arrived drunk and I got startled. The glass slipped from my hand. I remember the silence before the storm, his gaze fixed on the red liquid spreading across the fabric. Then came the slap so hard I fell to the floor. My mom tried to intervene, but he pushed her against the wall. That night, lying in bed, I heard my mom crying in the next room. I wanted to do something, but what could a 10-year-old boy do? I was scared, so scared that I wet the bed, something that hadn't happened since I was very young. The next morning, when my dad discovered it, he beat me again, this time with the belt. At school, I made up excuses for the bruises. I said I had fallen off my bike, that I had hurt myself playing soccer. My teacher, Mrs. Martinez, started to suspect. One day she called me after class and asked if everything was okay at home. I almost told her, almost. But then I remembered what my dad had said. What happens at home stays at home. If you tell anyone, it will be much worse. I tried to seek help once. I called the police when I was 12 years old after my dad broke my mom's arm. They came, talked to my dad, who was sober and extremely cordial. My mom, scared, said she had fallen down the stairs. The police left. That night, I was beaten until I passed out. After that, I learned to become invisible, not to make noise, not to ask for anything, not to exist. I lived in the corners of the house trying not to draw attention. At school, I became quiet, reserved. I didn't bring friends home, didn't participate in after-school activities. My world came down to surviving one day at a time. My mom, she tried to protect me as much as she could. Many times she attracted my dad's attention to herself when he started getting irritated with me. She received the blows that would have been for me. At night, when he finally fell asleep, she would come to my room, hug me and say that one day everything would be fine, that we would find a way out. Several times she talked about running away, but to where? We had no money, we had nowhere to go. My dad controlled every penny that came into the house. He had made my mom quit her job, claiming he needed her at home. In reality, it was a way to keep her isolated, dependent. As I grew older, I started noticing changes in myself. Sadness gave way to hatred, submission to silent rebellion. I had nightmares almost every night. I started having dark thoughts. I thought about what it would be like if my dad simply disappeared, if he died in a car accident, if he never came home again. At 14 years old, I started cutting myself. Small cuts on my arms, on my thighs, in places no one would see. It was a way to transform internal pain into something physical, something I could see and control. It was the only thing in my life I could control. It was around this time that I started planning our escape. I saved small amounts of money I managed to earn doing jobs for neighbors, mowing lawns, walking dogs. I kept everything hidden in a box buried in the backyard. I researched shelters for victims of domestic violence on the internet. I dreamed of the day when my mom and I could start over, somewhere else, far from him. But every time I mentioned running away to my mom, I saw the terror in her eyes. "He'll find us," she would say. "And when that happens, he'll kill us." I knew she was right. My dad had sworn this several times. "If you try to leave me, I'll find you and kill you, you and the kid." And I knew it wasn't an empty threat. I knew what he was capable of. At 16 years old, I was already taller than my dad, stronger too. I started positioning myself between him and my mom when things got ugly. The first time I did this, he was so surprised he backed off. For a brief moment, I saw fear in his eyes, but that fear soon transformed into something more dangerous: resentment. He started seeing me as a threat. The beatings got worse. He would wait until I was sleeping or attack me from behind. He used objects, belts, cables, anything at hand. Once he pushed me down the stairs, I broke my wrist in the fall. At the hospital, I said I had fallen skateboarding. My mental health deteriorated rapidly. I had panic attacks, chronic insomnia. At school, my performance plummeted. Teachers noticed something was wrong, but I had already learned to lie, to disguise. The shame of exposing what happened at home was greater than the desire to ask for help. At home, I started sleeping with a knife under the pillow, not to use it, just to feel less vulnerable, to have something to defend myself if he decided to attack me during the night. It was only a matter of time until one of us didn't survive the next confrontation. I knew that. My mom knew that. And somehow, I think my dad knew it too. The year I turned 16 was when things really started to spiral out of control. My dad lost the job he had gotten at another shop. He started spending entire days at home drinking from early on. The violence became more frequent, more intense. It was no longer just slaps or punches. He started using objects, belts, broomsticks, once even a hot pan that left a permanent mark on my mom's back. I remember a specific day that changed something inside me. It was a Sunday, and my dad had gone out to drink with some friends. My mom and I had a few hours of peace. We watched a movie together, made popcorn. It was almost like being normal for a moment. She even smiled a few times, a real smile that I rarely saw. When we heard his car arriving, the terror returned instantly. Her face lost all color. We quickly put away everything that could indicate we were having fun. He hated seeing us happy, as if our happiness were a personal insult to him. He came in stumbling, drunker than normal. He looked at both of us sitting on the couch and immediately started shouting accusations that we were talking about him behind his back, that we were planning to abandon him, that my mom was probably turning me against him. My mom asked him to calm down, said we were just watching TV. That's when he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her to the kitchen. I ran after them. I saw when he grabbed a knife from the drawer. "You think you can leave me, you bitch? Think you can take my son away from me?" Something snapped inside me at that moment. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed a baseball bat that was in the corner of the living room, a gift from my grandfather before he passed away, and hit my dad's back with all the strength I had. He staggered, dropped the knife, and turned to me with a look I'll never forget. It was pure hatred. What followed was the worst beating of my life. He broke 3 of my ribs, dislocated my shoulder, and left my face so disfigured I couldn't go to school for 2 weeks. My mom tried to intervene, but he threw her against the wall with such force she passed out. When I finally managed to drag myself to my room hours later, I made a promise to myself. That would be the last time he would hurt us. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I needed to end it. The next morning, my mom took me to the hospital. We invented a story about me being attacked by a gang on the way to school. The doctors clearly didn't believe it, but they didn't ask many questions. A social worker came to talk to me, gave me a card, said I could call her if I needed to talk. I threw the card away as soon as we left the hospital. We had tried that path before. There was no help for us. The weeks that followed were strangely calm. It was as if my dad had been scared by his own violence. He drank less, spoke little, left the house more. My mom and I started believing that maybe, just maybe, things could improve. It was an illusion, of course. The calm before the storm. A month later, I discovered something that would change everything. I was looking for a phone charger in my parents' room. Mine had broken when I found a box hidden in the back of my dad's closet. Inside it, there was a gun, fake documents with our names, and several newspaper clippings about women who had been killed by their husbands. Some of the clippings were circled with notes in the margin: no witnesses, perfect alibi, never found the body. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just impulsive violence, it was premeditated. He was planning to kill us, probably for years, waiting for the right moment. Maybe when I left home for college, leaving my mom alone and vulnerable. I showed the box to my mom when she arrived from the market. I'll never forget the expression on her face. It wasn't shock or surprise, it was recognition. She already knew, or at least suspected. He told me once, she spoke with a trembling voice, that if I tried to run away, he would kill me, bury my body where no one would ever find it, and tell everyone I had abandoned you both. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. The images of those newspaper clippings wouldn't leave my head. Women who probably thought, like my mom, that one day things would get better, that their abusers would change. Women who had waited too long. I started having terrible nightmares. I dreamed of my mom dead, buried somewhere I would never find her. I would wake up screaming, sweating cold. I started sleeping less and less. I began keeping watch, listening to my dad's movements through the house, waiting for him to do something. At school, my performance completely plummeted. I couldn't concentrate. I had dissociation episodes, moments when I simply disconnected, unable to process what was happening around me. A teacher referred me to the school psychologist, but I missed all the appointments. What could I say? My dad is planning to kill my mom and maybe me too. Who would believe me? The weeks passed and my dad's behavior became increasingly erratic. Sometimes he was almost kind. He brought gifts for my mom, talked about trips we would take together. Other times he sat in silence for hours, watching her with a look that chilled me to the bone. One day, coming back from school, I found him in the backyard, digging a deep hole. He said he was planning to build a pool. The hole was the perfect size for a body. That night, I sat with my mom while my dad was at the bar. I told her we needed to run away, that we couldn't wait anymore. She cried, held my hands, and agreed. We would do it over the weekend, when he normally drank more and slept deeply. We would take only the essentials and go to her cousin's house in another state, someone he didn't know about. For 2 days, we secretly gathered what we needed. Important documents, some clothes, the little money we had managed to hide. Hope began to be born in me for the first time in years. Maybe we could really escape. Maybe there was a life beyond that nightmare. The night before our planned escape, my dad came home earlier than normal. He seemed sober, calm. He said he wanted to talk to my mom alone. I was reluctant to leave them, but she assured me she would be fine. She went to their room and I went to mine, but I left the door ajar to listen. The conversation started in low tones, inaudible. Then the voices started to rise. I heard my dad accuse my mom of planning to abandon him. He had found the partially packed suitcase hidden under the bed. I heard the sound of something breaking, my mom's muffled scream. I ran to their room. My dad had my mom pressed against the wall, his forearm against her throat. Her face was turning purple. When he saw me, he released her and came toward me. "You're in on this too, aren't you? Planning to leave me like I'm trash. After everything I've done for you." He lunged at me, but this time I didn't back down. Something had changed inside me. Fear gave way to anger, a cold and calculated anger I had never felt before. I looked him in the eyes and saw for the first time a hesitation, as if he realized I was no longer the scared boy he could intimidate. "Don't touch her again," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. He laughed, a laugh that contained no humor. "Or what? What are you going to do, kid? Going to hit me? Kill me?" In that moment, I realized that was exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to end him, the constant threat he represented, but not there, not like that, not with my mom watching, not in a way that could incriminate her, too. I backed down, pretending submission. "Sorry, Dad, you're right. We're not going anywhere." He seemed satisfied with my surrender, turned his attention back to my mom. "Tomorrow we're going to talk about this properly. Now I'm tired." He left the room, went downstairs. I heard the refrigerator open, him grabbing another beer, probably. My mom came to me trembling. "We can't wait until tomorrow," she whispered. "He's going to kill us tonight. I saw it in his eyes." I agreed. We needed to leave immediately. I grabbed my phone to call a taxi, but there was no signal. I looked out the window and saw that the phone cables had been cut. He had planned this. That's when I heard something that froze my blood. The sound of the garage opening, the car engine starting. He was leaving. But where to? To get something. Someone? My mom pulled me to the window. "Look," she pointed. In the back seat of the car, I clearly saw the gun I had found in the closet along with a shovel and ropes. There was no more doubt about his intentions. "We have to go now," I insisted. "We can run to the main road, ask for help." But my mom shook her head. "He'll come back before we can get there. And if he catches us on the road, no one will witness." She was right. We were isolated. The nearest house was more than half a mile away. If he caught us in the middle of the road, that's when I realized there was only one way out. One that I had been unconsciously considering for weeks, maybe years. The only way to ensure my mom and I would survive that night. "Go to the basement," I told her. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "What are you going to do?" Her eyes widened with fear and understanding. What I should have done a long time ago. My dad's car left the garage and disappeared into the darkness of the road. I didn't know how much time I would have until he returned, but I knew it would be my only chance. I ran to my room, grabbed the knife I kept hidden under the mattress. It wouldn't be enough. My dad was bigger, stronger, and would be prepared for a confrontation. That's when I remembered the toolbox in the garage. My grandfather had left several tools to my dad when he died. Hammers, screwdrivers, saws, and a heavy sledgehammer that my dad sometimes used for work in the yard. I ran down the stairs, making sure my mom was safe in the basement. I entered the garage and found the toolbox open. He had probably grabbed something before leaving. The sledgehammer was there, leaning against the wall. It was heavy, with a worn wooden handle and a solid metal head. I tested the weight in my hands, feeling a strange calm invade me. It wasn't an impulsive decision. Somehow I had known for years that it would come to this point, that one day it would be him or us. I had tried all the other paths, asking for help, planning escapes, enduring the abuse in the hope that one day they would cease. Nothing had worked, and now he was planning to end it all at once. I looked at my reflection in the dusty garage mirror. I didn't recognize the face staring back at me. The eyes were empty, distant, as if they belonged to someone else. Maybe they did. Maybe the boy I had been, scared, hopeful, innocent, had been dead for a long time, replaced by this shell that only knew how to feel fear and hatred. I heard the sound of the car returning long before I saw the headlights illuminating the garage entrance. My heart accelerated, but my hands remained steady. I positioned myself behind the door that connected the garage to the kitchen, the sledgehammer firm in my hands. The plan was simple: wait for him to enter, hit him hard enough to incapacitate him, grab the car keys, and flee with my mom. I didn't intend to kill him. Not consciously, at least. I just wanted him to be unconscious long enough for us to escape. The car parked, the engine silenced. I heard the door open and close, footsteps in the garage entrance. The kitchen door opened. He entered, carrying a large rolled-up tarp. He didn't see me immediately, busy with whatever he was carrying. That's when I heard something that froze my blood. He was talking to himself, murmuring plans. Bury the bitch first, the kid after. No one will miss them. I'll say they ran away together. There was no more doubt about his intentions. It wasn't an empty threat. It wasn't just another of his fits of rage that would pass with time. He had gone out to prepare our graves. Something snapped inside me at that moment, like a switch being turned off. All hesitation, all fear, all the humanity that still remained in me, everything disappeared, replaced by a single impulse: survive. He finally noticed me standing in the shadows. His eyes widened for an instant before narrowing in fury. "What are you doing here, kid? Where's your mother?" I didn't respond. I just took a step forward, the sledgehammer still hidden behind my back. "I'm talking to you." He dropped the tarp and advanced toward me. "Where is that bitch?" That's when he saw the sledgehammer. He stopped, confused for a moment, then laughed, a cold and cruel laugh I knew all too well. "What are you going to do with that? Think you can scare me? Hand that over right now before I break your neck." He extended his hand, expecting me to obey as I always had, like the obedient and terrified son he had raised. But that son no longer existed. "You're never going to hurt us again," I said, my voice unrecognizable even to myself, his face contorted in fury. He advanced, arms extended to grab me. It was instinctive. I raised the sledgehammer and brought it down with all the strength I had. I hit his shoulder. He screamed, staggered backward. It wasn't enough to stop him. He recovered quickly, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You're dead." He advanced again. This time I aimed for the head. The sound was indescribable. A muffled noise, like something being crushed. He fell to his knees, blood running down his face, but he was still conscious, still trying to get up. "Son, please." For an instant I hesitated, but then I saw his eyes. There was no regret there, only calculation. He was trying to manipulate me, as he always had. If I stopped now, he would kill me. Kill my mom. The second blow was stronger than the first. He fell on his back, motionless. The third blow was unnecessary, but I couldn't stop. All the anger, all the terror, all the helplessness of the last years exploded inside me. I struck once, twice, 3 more times, until my arms were exhausted and the garage had transformed into a scene of horror. When I finally stopped, I was panting, covered in blood. The sledgehammer slipped from my hands and fell to the floor with a dull thud. I looked at my dad's body, or what was left of it. I felt nothing. No remorse, no relief, no fear, just emptiness. I stood there looking at my dad's body. For how long? Seconds? Minutes? I can't say. Time seemed to have stopped. The silence in the garage was absolute, interrupted only by the sound of my heavy breathing and the dripping of blood on the concrete floor. It was the sound of soft footsteps behind me that brought me back to reality. My mom was standing in the doorway, looking at the scene before her. Her face showed no horror, as I expected, no disgust, no fear. There was only relief, a deep and exhausted relief, as if an enormous weight had finally been removed from her shoulders. "It's over," she whispered, more to herself than to me. I looked at my blood-stained hands, at the sledgehammer on the floor, at the body. The reality of what I had done began to slowly seep into my consciousness. I had killed my dad. I was a murderer. "We need to call the police," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm to my own ears. My mom shook her head. "No, not yet. First, we need to think." She entered the garage, carefully avoiding the blood spreading across the floor. She picked up the tarp my dad had brought, the same tarp he probably planned to use to wrap us in, and spread it next to the body. "Help me," she said emotionlessly. Together we rolled the body onto the tarp and wrapped it. Then we cleaned the blood from the floor as best we could. We washed the sledgehammer and waited. She made me take off the blood-stained clothes and put them in a plastic bag. Throughout this process, we didn't exchange a word. It was as if we were on autopilot, executing mechanical tasks without really processing what we were doing. It was surreal, as if it were happening to someone else somewhere else. When we finished, she made me sit at the kitchen table and made tea for both of us. Such a normal gesture, so domestic, in absurd contrast to what had just happened. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said, sitting across from me. "We're going to call the police. We're going to tell the truth, almost all of it, that your father abused us for years, that we discovered he was planning to kill us, that you acted in self-defense to save our lives." "But no," she interrupted me, her voice firm. "Don't say you attacked him while his back was turned. Don't say you hit him more times than necessary. Say he came at you with the gun that's in his car, and you had no choice. Understand?" I nodded, unable to articulate words. "You're going to a juvenile detention center," she continued, her eyes fixed on mine. "Maybe for a few months, maybe for a year or more, but you'll get out. You'll have a life after this. I won't let him take that from you, too." That's when the tears finally came. Not for my dad, not for what I had done, but for the sudden understanding of how much my mom had endured for me, how much she was still willing to sacrifice to protect me. We called the police. When they arrived, we told our version of the story, that my dad had been violent for years, that we had discovered his plans to kill us, that he had returned home with a gun, and I had acted in self-defense. We showed them the gun in the car, the newspaper clippings, the fake documents. We showed them the bruises on our bodies, the old scars, the evidence of years of abuse. The police officers exchanged glances. I think they understood what really happened, even if we didn't say it explicitly. I was taken to the police station, interrogated for hours. I repeated the same story several times, that he came at me with the gun, that I grabbed the first thing I found to defend myself, that I didn't intend to kill him, just stop him. A few weeks later, I went to trial. The judge considered my clean record, the evidence of prolonged abuse, my dad's clear planning to eliminate us. I was convicted of manslaughter, with mitigating circumstances, 1 year in a juvenile detention center, followed by 3 years probation. It could have been much worse. The first days at the center were the hardest. The news spread quickly. The boy who killed his dad with a sledgehammer. Those headlines always tell only half the story, you know? Some of the other inmates treated me with a mixture of fear and respect. Others tried to test me, see if I was as dangerous as the rumors suggested. I kept my head down, spoke little, avoided conflicts. At night, the nightmares came, not with my dad's face as I expected, but with the sound, that indescribable sound of the sledgehammer hitting his skull. I would wake up screaming, sweating cold. The center's psychologist tried to help me process the trauma, not just of what I had done, but of the years of abuse that preceded it. At first, I refused to talk. Gradually, the words started coming out like a dam that, once cracked, can no longer hold the water. I talked about the constant terror we lived in, about how I had learned to read my dad's mood by the sound of his footsteps, about how I planned escape routes in every room of the house, about how I dreamed of his death long before I caused it. My mom visited me every week. She looked different, lighter, more alive. She found a job, was making new friends, rebuilding her life. Sometimes that made me angry. How could she move on so easily while I was imprisoned, haunted by what I had done? But then I remembered everything she had endured, the years of abuse that were her own prison. She deserved that freedom, that chance to live without fear. Little by little, I began to accept what had happened, not to justify or minimize, but to understand. I had grown up in an environment where violence was the primary language, where fear was the dominant emotion. I had learned that the only way to survive was to become stronger, more relentless than the aggressor. My dad taught me well, too well. I started wondering if I was like him, if that capacity for violence, that coldness I felt while hitting him repeatedly, was something inherited. Did I carry his cruelty in my genes? These questions kept me awake at night, long after the nightmares had ceased. At the center, I participated in group therapy with other young people who had committed violent acts. Many had stories similar to mine: abusive homes, violent parents, absence of any sense of security. Some talked about their crimes with pride, others with indifference, some, like me, with a complex mixture of remorse and justification. You did what you needed to do to survive, one of the counselors told me. Now you need to decide who you want to be from here on. I started reading a lot. Psychology, philosophy, anything that could help me understand what had happened, what I had become. I discovered that many children of abusers become abusers themselves, perpetuating the cycle. Others go to the opposite extreme, becoming incapable of any form of assertiveness or confrontation. Few find the balance. 6 months after my detention, I received news that the house where I grew up, the house where everything happened, had been sold. My mom had moved to a small apartment in another city. A new beginning, she said. For both of us, when you get out. That's when I started thinking seriously about the future, about what I would do when I was released, about the person I wanted to be. I couldn't change what I had done, but I could choose what to do from there. Some of the other inmates mocked me for my obsession with books, with therapy, with improving. You killed your old man. Nothing's going to change that, one of them told me. He was right. Of course, nothing would change the fact that I had taken a life, that however monstrous my dad was, I had become something equally terrible that night in the garage. But maybe, just maybe, I could do something with the rest of my life that somehow compensated for it. I started helping other inmates with their studies. I discovered I had a natural ability to explain complex concepts in simple ways. I started thinking about maybe becoming a teacher one day. When I completed 11 months at the center, my lawyer came to visit me with good news. Due to my good behavior and therapeutic progress, I would be released after serving exactly 1 year, the minimum of my sentence. In 1 month, I would be free. Do you have plans? He asked. I did, actually. I planned to finish high school, go to college if I could get a scholarship. I wanted to study psychology, better understand what leads people like my dad to become what they are. What leads people like me to cross that line? Most importantly, I wanted to make sure I would never again be capable of what I did that night, that I would never again allow anger, fear, and desperation to consume me that way. On the eve of my release, I had one last session with the center's psychologist. He asked me if I regretted what I had done. I don't know, I answered honestly. I regret having reached that point. I regret that we couldn't get help sooner, that we couldn't escape sooner. I regret that my dad became the monster he was. But that night, in those circumstances, I don't know if there was another way. He nodded without judgment. And how do you feel now about to leave here? Scared, I admitted. I don't know who I am outside here. I don't know who I am without constant fear, without hatred. Who is Lucas when he's not surviving? That, he said with a small smile, is the question we all spend our lives trying to answer. The next day, my mom came to pick me up. When she was waiting in the lobby, something strange happened. For the first time in a long time, maybe for the first time in my life, I felt hope. Not just temporary relief, not just momentary absence of terror, but true hope, the possibility of a different future. I hugged her tightly, feeling her tears wet my shoulder. Let's go home, she said. A new home, a new life. As we left the center, I looked at the open sky above us. It was a clear day, the sun shining brightly. I took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill my lungs. I was free, but the question persisted. Free to become who? That happened exactly 1 year ago. Today is my first day of complete freedom. I left the juvenile detention center yesterday, finished arranging my things in the small apartment I share with my mom, and decided to come to this park to think, to try to understand what happened, what I am now. The year I spent at the center was transformative. I think that's the word. It wasn't easy. Far from it. I had to face not only what my dad had done to us during all those years, but also what I had done to him. I had to accept that part of me was capable of extreme violence, of taking a life. The first months were the worst. The nightmares, the panic attacks, the dissociation episodes. Sometimes I would wake up screaming, feeling the weight of the sledgehammer in my hands, hearing that terrible sound. Other times I was completely numb, unable to feel anything beyond a deep and cold emptiness. The center's psychologists diagnosed me with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, not just for what I did, but for everything I lived through before. Years of constant abuse, of living in a permanent state of alert, leave deep marks on the mind. Marks that don't disappear easily. I participated in individual and group therapy. At first, I could barely talk about what had happened. The words got stuck in my throat, But gradually I began to open small cracks in that wall I had built around my emotions. And when the first words came out, the rest came like a flood. I talked about the constant fear we lived in, about the sounds I learned to recognize, the specific jingle of my dad's keys when he was drunk, the different creak of the stairs when he climbed with anger, about the survival strategies I developed over the years, how to become invisible, how to anticipate his moods, how to divert his anger from my mom to me when necessary. I talked about the night everything changed, about discovering my dad's plans to kill us, about the feeling of having no way out, of being cornered, about that moment in the garage when something snapped inside me and I became someone else, someone capable of doing what I did. It was difficult but necessary, like draining an infected wound, painful but essential for healing. My mom also went through therapy during that year. She visited me regularly at the center, and I noticed the changes in her gradually. At first, she was still scared, still startled at sudden movements, still spoke in a low voice, as if afraid to be heard. But little by little, she recovered her strength, her voice. She found a job as an assistant at an elementary school. She made friends, started smiling more. Sometimes that left me with contradictory feelings. On one hand, I was happy she was finally living without fear. On the other, I felt a twinge of resentment. I was imprisoned, dealing with the consequences of having saved our lives while she was free. I'm not proud of these thoughts, but they existed. I talked about it with my therapist at the center. He helped me understand that these feelings were normal, part of the process, that I needed to recognize them without judgment, without punishing myself for having them. You and your mom were imprisoned in different situations, he told me. She in an abusive marriage, you in a detention center. Both are freeing themselves just at different times and in different ways. It was helpful to think that way, to see our situation not as a competition of suffering, but as parallel journeys of recovery. In the final months at the center, I started focusing on the future. I resumed my studies, preparing to complete high school as soon as I got out. I developed an interest in psychology and philosophy. I wanted to understand more deeply human behavior, the nature of violence, the cycles of abuse. I wanted to understand why my dad became who he was, why I did what I did, how to break that cycle. One of the center's counselors told me something that stayed with me. The best revenge against your father would be to live a life completely different from his, to be the man he never managed to be. That became a kind of mantra for me, a mission. Not just to survive what happened, but to transform it into something meaningful, to use that terrible experience to maybe one day help others who went through similar situations. Yesterday, when I left the center, my mom was waiting for me. She seemed nervous, anxious. I think we were both asking ourselves the same thing. Who were we to each other now? Who had I become during that year apart? Who had she become? The journey to our new apartment was silent, both processing this new reality. When we arrived, she showed me my room. Small, simple, but clean and welcoming. There were books on the shelf, some I had mentioned being interested in during her visits. A desk for my studies, a picture on the wall with an image of a sunrise. For new beginnings, she said, pointing to the picture. That night, we sat together at the kitchen table, eating the lasagna she had prepared, my favorite dish. We talked about plans. I would complete high school through a special program for students who had to interrupt their studies. Then, maybe college, if we could get scholarships. She was saving what she could from her new job. I'm proud of you, she said suddenly. I know that's not what I should say, considering everything, but I am. You saved our lives. I didn't know what to answer. Part of me wanted to accept that praise, that absolution. Another part felt I didn't deserve it, that what I did was wrong, even if necessary. I don't know if I did the right thing, I confessed. Sometimes I think we should have run away before, looked for help another way, that I could have found another way out. She took my hand over the table. We tried, remember? Many times. No one helped us. No one believed. You did what you needed to do to keep us alive. Maybe she's right. Or maybe we both need to believe that to move forward. This morning I woke up early and came to this park. I needed space to think, to process everything. I sat on this bench and watched people passing by. Mothers with children, elderly couples, teenagers laughing, normal people living normal lives. I wondered if I would ever feel part of this world again. If I would ever be just another 17-year-old guy, worried about college, friends, the future, or if I'll always be the boy who killed his dad. The truth is, I don't know who I am now. I'm no longer that terrified child, always waiting for the next blow, but I'm also not an ordinary teenager with ordinary concerns. I carry with me experiences that most people, fortunately, will never have. I carry a weight that sometimes seems impossible to bear, but I also carry lessons about resilience, survival, about how humans can endure the unbearable and still find strength to move forward. I don't know if what I did was justified, if I had the right to take my dad's life, even knowing what he planned to do to us. That's a question that will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. A moral question without a clear answer. What I know is that I don't want his death to have been in vain. I don't want that night in the garage to define who I am, who I'll be. I want to build something from these ruins, a life that's worth it, maybe even one that helps others who went through what I went through. Tomorrow, I start classes to complete high school. Next month, I begin volunteer work at a shelter for victims of domestic violence. Just administrative work, nothing involving direct contact with victims yet, but it's a start, a small step towards something bigger. My therapist, yes, I continue in therapy. I'll probably continue for a long time, says I'm walking a path of redemption, not to erase what I did, because that's impossible, but to create a balance, to transform that darkness into some kind of light. I don't know if I completely believe that. I don't know if it's possible to compensate for a life taken, but I have to try. I have to believe there's something beyond that night in the garage, beyond the sound of the sledgehammer, beyond the blood on the concrete. I have to believe that both my mom and I deserve to live without fear, that we deserve a future, even if we arrived at it through such a terrible path. If you made it this far and really understood what I went through, I ask that you like this video right now, subscribe to Traumatic Accounts, turn on notifications so you don't miss any story, and comment what time it is where you're watching this. It may seem strange, but knowing there's someone on the other side really listening, really caring, means a lot to me. It means I'm not alone with these memories, with these questions that have no easy answer. I don't know if I'm a hero or a villain in this story, probably neither. Just a kid who faced the impossible and did what he thought he needed to do. A kid who now tries to rebuild something from the rubble. A kid who's still learning to live without fear, to breathe without that constant weight on his chest. A kid who, despite everything, still hopes to one day look at the sky and feel something beyond guilt, something beyond doubt. Something that maybe, if I'm lucky, resembles peace.